How about now? All right. All right. Open your Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's pretty easy to find the fifth book in the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 6. I want to welcome all of you who are joining us on Facebook Live or YouTube or our website, however you found us. God bless you. Thank you. I want to give you a little context before we dive into Deuteronomy chapter 6. I think of the book of Deuteronomy as a do-over. And what I mean by that is the children of Israel are at the edge of the promised land again. This is the second time. You remember what happened the first time? Yeah, they really didn't want to go in. Okay? They were caught up on how tall the people were in the land of Canaan, and they had some walled cities. And apparently they didn't think the God that completely decimated the Egyptian army and did all those crazy miracles in the wilderness could, take care of some tall people and some walls. And so this made God very, very angry, and he told them, okay, turn around, go back where you started from, and then come back. And of course, by the time they got back, they were all dead, which was the whole point, okay? And so these people's children are at the edge of the promised land, and they're going to go in, right? I mean, if God tells them to stand on their head or whatever, they're going to go in. And so they're ready. And God had already told Moses that he wasn't going in, okay? What Moses did was, the problem was he hit a rock instead of speaking to the rock. You remember that? For water to come out. And God said, well, you and Aaron ain't going in because of that. Now, I thought that was a little harsh. Don't you think? I mean, I really do. I thought that was a little harsh, but I'm not God. But anyway, I think Moses was ready to go, don't you? Seriously. I mean, Moses was the first pastor. Do you get that? I mean, he put up with all those complaining people for a long time. I mean, he was really the first pastor, so I think he weighed his options. It's like, okay, stay with these grumbling people or go to paradise, and I think he was like, I'm ready to go, right? But before God took him, God told Moses to do a do-over with these people. In other words, go over everything again. Go over all the laws and statutes and all of those things. It was kind of a do-over. But the biggest thing that God was telling Moses to do was to remind them of the commitment he made to them and the commitment they made to him. Does that make sense? It was to remind them that God has fulfilled his commitment. He will always, always do that. But they also made a commitment to God to wholeheartedly follow him all of their days, that they would put him number one. When they entered into that land of Canaan, that everything they did would revolve around that commitment, right? Are you following me? Okay, so we're going to come back to this. I want you to remember it. But before we get to this text, I want to ask you a question. What do you think makes a good church? What makes a healthy church? Let me say it this way. What are the ingredients that go into a healthy church? Just as every good cake or pie has ingredients, what are the ingredients that make up a really good, healthy church? Someone talk to me. Huh? Okay. Huh? Okay. All right. What else? Huh? Loving commitment. What else? Good fellowship. Yeah, I think we could all make a list, and if we showed each other our list, it would look pretty close, don't you think? I mean, really. So let's take a look at a couple of them. First of all, the gospel needs to be front and center, right? The Bible has to be our guide of faith and practice. Good people, right? Loving people, caring people, people who just love other people because they're made in God's image, right? That's essential. Missions. I think most Christians want to feel like they're part of something bigger than the local church, right? They want to feel like they're contributing to advancing the kingdom of God throughout the world. So missions. What else? Leadership, right? Man, the church needs good leaders, right? From top to bottom, from the senior pastors through the elders and deacons, to the Sunday school teachers, on down to the person who sits on a committee, right? So good leaders. And this list could go on and on, couldn't it? I mean, it really could. And the interesting thing is, I think we're working toward all of those things. I really do. I have a plan. I had a short-term plan when I got here, and I have a long-term plan. And what's interesting is we are really working toward all of those things, and that's good, right? I mean, it is, but understand that a church, we could have all of those things, but still not be the church that Christ has called us to be. You understand that? And if you're wondering what is the most important piece that connects everything together, understand that it's commitment. Nothing else matters as much as your total commitment to Christ. Mine too, right? And we need to understand we can't do this by ourselves, can we? We can't. We need each other, but we must meet each other in the context of total commitment to Christ. And I bring all this up for two reasons. First of all, last week we just finished up a series talking about evangelism, like a 4-week series. You remember that? How when we said yes to Jesus, we basically said yes to sharing Jesus wherever he has placed us. I mean, that's our job. That's part of being a Christian, right? We don't have to go across the city. We don't have to go across the state. We don't have to go across the country or the world. All Jesus asks us to do is share him with the people that we come in contact on a daily basis. But we're not going to do that unless we're totally committed to Christ. I mean, we're just not. That's a fact. Second reason is I just feel that coming out of COVID in the last 2 years, I think commitment has fallen on hard times. Would you agree? I really do. Not just in churches, but everywhere you go. My goodness, you walk into a restaurant, they don't have enough employees, right? I mean, that's a fact. Businesses are not open all week like they once were. I mean, there's a lot of businesses in Bowling Green, right, Jennifer, that are shut down 1 or 2 days a week, and they'll even tell you why. They'll put a sign on the door, we don't have enough people. And so people are not committed to work like they were or like they should. Maybe some of you have experienced this. I know Jennifer did before she retired, right? So people are not committed to work. Obviously, families are struggling because people don't take their family commitments very seriously. And also churches. Churches are still struggling as well. But what I continue to read is when people came back to church from COVID, they didn't come back to serve. They didn't come back to actually be involved if they came back at all. Does that make sense? And so I want to talk about commitment for about 2 or 3 weeks. I may finish up next week. It may go into another week. But I want to talk about commitment. Because for a church like ours, we have to understand if we're going to be the church that Christ has called us to be. And I need you to understand that's all I'm after. Do you get that? I have to tell you that maybe earlier on in my ministry, I was worried about numbers. Right, Jennifer? Really was. And a lot of pastors are very preoccupied with numbers. How many people you got? That's something to boast about and all of that. And that's still the way it is with a lot of pastors. But you got to understand, right now, I'm more towards the end than I am toward the beginning. And so I've learned a lot, and God has taught me a lot. And so right now, all I'm focused on is being the church that Christ has called us to be, regardless of how many are sitting out there. Does that make sense? But if we're going to be the church that Christ has called us to be, we each have to be totally committed to Jesus Christ first and foremost. Because I know when that happens, People will be committed to the church, and I think the church will grow as well, don't you? So let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're going to start reading in verse 4. I think I'm going to read from my phone. Is that okay? The Bible, the print on my Bible just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And if I get a really large print Bible, it's almost like carrying a cinder block up here. You know what I mean? So I'm going to read from my phone. We're going to start in verse 4. Okay. Yeah, we're going to put this up on the screen. What's up on the screen will be the same translation I'll be reading from. I know sometimes that helps, but I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. It says, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road and when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. The Lord your God will soon bring you into the land he swore to give when he made a vow to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a land large, prosperous, with prosperous cities that you did not build. The houses will be richly stocked with goods you did not produce. You will draw water from cisterns you did not dig, and you will eat from vineyards and olive trees you did not plant. When you have eaten your fill in this land, be careful not to forget the Lord who rescued you from slavery in the land of Egypt. You must fear the Lord your God and serve him. When you take an oath, you must use only his name. You must not worship any of the gods of neighboring nations, for the Lord your God who lives among you is a jealous God. His anger will flare up against you, and he will wipe you from the face of the earth. You must not test the Lord your God as you did when you complained at Massah. You must diligently obey the commands of the Lord your God, all the laws and decrees he has given you. Do what is right and good in the Lord's sight, so all will go well with you. Then you will enter and occupy the good land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors. You will drive out all the enemies living in the land, just as the Lord said you would. In the future, your children will ask, what is the meaning of these laws, decrees, and regulations that the Lord our God has commanded us to obey? Then you must tell them, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his strong hand. The Lord did miraculous signs and wonders before our eyes, dealing terrifying blows against Egypt and Pharaoh and all his people. He brought us out of Egypt so he could give us this land he had sworn to give to our ancestors. And the Lord our God commanded us to obey all these decrees and fear him so he can continue to bless us and preserve our lives as he has done to this day. For we will be counted as righteous when we obey all the commands the Lord has given us. Whew, that's a lot. All right, let me get a drink of water. Okay. All right, guys, I don't know about you, but I'm a thinker. And what I mean by that is I analyze everything. Any of you like that? Yeah, it drives Jennifer crazy, doesn't it? Because, we'll be listening to a song or watching a movie, and I'm like, that doesn't work. That's not the way it is. And it drives Jennifer crazy because she'll say, why can't you just leave stuff alone, right? That's her favorite thing to say to me. Why can't you just leave stuff alone, right? But I like to think about stuff. I like to analyze things. I like to think about life in general. And there was this one question that I've always asked, and it's this. I've always wondered if there's one thing that you can say that everything else is about. Are you tracking with me? One thing that connects everything else. And I've thought, and I've thought, and I've thought, and it dawned on me that I had heard the answer. It was in an old kind of a silly song. You remember the Hokey Pokey? You remember the Hokey Pokey? Okay, so you put your right foot in, you take your right foot out, you put your right foot in, and you do what? You shake it all about, you do the Hokey Pokey, you turn yourself around, and then what does it say? It says that's what it's all about, right? Okay, then you put your left foot in, your left foot out, left foot in, you shake it all about, you do the Hokey Pokey, you turn yourself around, and then what does it say? It says that's what it's all about. And then it just keeps going and going and going forever, right? Putting stuff in, taking stuff out. Now, it bugs the far out of me because I analyze everything, and I'm saying, you're not really telling me what it's about. I mean, seriously. It can't be about putting stuff in and taking stuff out. You say this is what it's about, but it can't be that. Just tell me what it's about. And it keeps going. It's like listening to a stinking politician, right? I mean, when someone asks a politician a question, do they answer the question? No. They spend 30 minutes talking, but they never answer the question. And I'm yelling at the TV, answer the question, right? And then when someone kind of asks them the question again, what do they say? Well, I'm just trying to give you the broader context, right? And I'm like, we didn't ask for the broader context. And that's the way this song is. It just keeps going and going, but at the very end, it does tell you what it's all about. You remember? It says, put your whole self in. That's what it says. It says, put your whole self in. That's what it's all about, it says. I mean, do you get that? It's about putting your entire self in. That's what everything depends on. So again, it's called commitment. And that's what I want to talk about. It's called commitment. Your life right now is a result of the commitments you have made. Do you get that? That's an absolute fact. Your life right now is a result of the commitments you have made and carried through on or didn't. But that's the way it is. So I want to bring us back to what it's all about. Let's start with some definitions. I put these in your bulletin. Simply put, a commitment is a promise to do something. Okay? A promise to do something. But let me say it this way, and this is what I put in your bulletin. A commitment is a promise that sets your priorities. Now, someone could say, well, you got that backwards, Pastor. You need to set your commitments based on your priorities. But you need to understand, if I make a commitment, it's already a priority, right? Do you get that? If I make a commitment, it's already a priority. If I say I'm coming to your house tomorrow night, I've made a commitment, and thus it has to be a priority. And everything else I do between now and then has to revolve around that commitment and priority, right? Because that's the way it works. If I make a commitment, it has to be a priority. Let's go a little bit farther. I put this in your bulletin. A commitment is made in the present, but kept in the what? Yeah. Now, that sounds very simple and obvious, but let me explain. A commitment is made in the present, but kept in the future, but I don't know what the future holds. Do you? I really don't. So if I say that I'm coming to your house tomorrow night, I don't know what's going to happen between now and then, do I? And neither do you. Shoot, I may get up and I may not feel like coming to your house. I'm not talking about being sick, okay? Let me explain. I'm not talking about being sick. I'm not talking about something catastrophic happening to where I don't feel like coming to your house. I may wake up in the morning and say, I just don't want to go to their house. I mean, how many of you, wake up in the morning and you're still in bed and you're just kind of going over your day? Any of you do that? I may wake up in the morning and say, shoot, I don't want to go to their house. I don't even like those people, right? I don't want to go to their house. house. I mean, that kid they have just bugs the far out of me, and I don't want to go there. So I may not feel like going to your house, but here's the thing. I didn't promise anything about my feelings, did I? I mean, I really didn't. Feelings, your commitments cannot be based on your feelings. This is why they're so very important. This is the way everything works. This is the way our society works, right? It's commitments. Let's do one more. A commitment gives rise to obligations. A commitment gives rise to obligations. Now, this is sounding less fun the more I talk, right? Because we're kind of getting serious here. A commitment gives rise to obligations. This is where a lot of people have problems because we really don't want to be obligated to nothing, do we? I mean, we really don't. I want to be able to do what I want to do. I don't want to feel obligated to you or to something. This is why when I go to a store or a car lot, especially a car lot, and the salesman comes up and says, "What? Can I help you?" What do I say? I'm just looking, right? Yeah, I'm just looking. Great words. Yeah, I'm just looking. Because if I say yes, what's going to happen? I'm going to be stuck with you, and I don't want to be stuck with you, right? I mean, that's exactly what happens. I want to be able to do what I want to do and go where I want to go and not have you following me around. I don't want any obligation. I don't want to feel obligated to you, right? So I say, I'm just looking, but what am I really saying? Leave me alone. Seriously, we all do it. Don't look at me like I'm an awful person. We do that, right? If I find something, I will find you. But if I don't, I want to be able to walk out here anytime I want. But what I'm getting at, it's this avoidance of obligations. And I'm telling you, this is the society we're living in. You've got to understand that. No one fulfills their obligation. Thus, there are no real commitments, are there? The commitments we make, the world makes, I mean, they don't mean anything. But let's go back. What if commitment is really what it's all about? Seriously. What if your full commitment to something is really what it's all about? What if you will never be satisfied in anything unless you're fully committed to it? Have you ever thought about that? Let's just step out of the realm of Christianity and kind of go into the secular world. What if you will never be satisfied with your job until you fully commit to it? You ever thought about that? Yeah. Now, I know we live in a different day and time. Even when I was young, and I know especially some of you older ones, you know, unless you were working at a temporary job, going to college and all of that, you know, kind of set that aside. People used to go to work and they did what? They stayed there, right? They worked and they worked and they worked because they had what? They made a commitment, they had obligations, therefore it had to be a priority, right? That's the way it used to work. People don't do that today, do they? Young kids, they don't do that today. I've talked to some young kids, and listen, they start a job on Monday, and guess what? They're gone on Friday. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it really is, but that's the world we're living in. But what if you will never be satisfied at your work until you fully commit yourself? I'm not talking about your job being your whole life. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just talking about that time that you're there. And again, it may not be your dream job, but I think most people really want to be satisfied, don't you? I think that they want to be satisfied with their work. Listen, I brag on Jennifer a lot because there's a lot to brag on, right? And plus, she's really pretty. And it's going to be a good afternoon for me. So, listen, she worked at Lowe's for 33 years. That's a long time, isn't it? 33 years. I know. I was there. I remember when she started her first day at Lowe's. It was over at the other store, right? Yeah. But the last 2 or 3 years have been really hard on Jennifer because new management had come in, and there are these young kids right out of college, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't know how to deal with people. They don't, and that's the most important thing about running a business. How do you deal with people? And they came in, and they were making everybody mad. They were being mean to everybody, and all these people were quitting, and Jennifer said, what if this happens to me? And I said, it's not going to happen to you. I said, you just be you. And the reason I said that is I know for a fact, for 33 years, she went into that store, she punched that time clock, and for those 8 hours, she gave her whole self to that job. She was nice, she did her job well, she showed up ready to work and all that. Now, she complained a lot when she got home. I heard that for 33 years too. But putting your whole self in, what if that's what it's all about with anything? How about relationships? There's a lot of people who don't want to commit to anything, right, in a relationship, and guess what? You will never be satisfied. It's not going to happen. In marriage or just shacking up or whatever it may be, you have to fully commit yourself. And listen, just to be a little transparent with you, I've always had trouble with this, haven't I, Jennifer? Fully committing myself to people. Now, I fully commit myself to Jennifer, but for other people, man, I've always been a little guarded, especially, as a pastor, because I've seen how things work. I really have. Church people can be the meanest people there are. I've seen how people treated some of my friends and stuff, and I've experienced this myself. And so I'm just kind of, I'm kind of standing back. It's not really opening up. But what if I will never be fully satisfied at a job I've been doing a long time until I fully commit myself? What about the Lord? Moses is talking to these people, and he's reminding them about the commitment that God has made to them. That God will always keep his commitments, no matter how much time goes by. He will always keep his commitments. But we, on the other hand, that's a different story, isn't it? It really is. How many of you remember the day you were baptized? Any of you remember that? Yeah. You remember standing in the water? You remember the questions the preacher asked you? That's what I remember the most. He said, Don, do you fully commit yourself to the Lord? Will you follow him in good times and bad times? Will he be your life? I remember that. And I said, yeah. I said, yeah. And so did you, right? You said yes. But man, I've let him down so many times, haven't you? Do you remember what I said a little bit earlier? That a commitment is a promise that sets your priorities. You remember that? What does that mean? Someone tell me what that means. Well, let me go this way. I know what it means to the world. I know exactly what it means to the world. It means that I can make a commitment, but if something better comes along, right? If something better comes along, or I just don't feel like it, or if it gets really, really hard, if it takes sacrifice, then I don't have to fulfill my commitment. That's exactly what it means to the world, is it not? But what about us? What's it mean to us as followers of Christ? Because remember, we're not of the world. What does that mean to us? It sounds right. I didn't hear all you said. Yeah, absolutely. When you said yes to Jesus, okay, it means that everything else you do in life revolves around that commitment. Do you understand that? I mean, seriously, do you get that? Everything, your social life, your marriage, everything revolves around that commitment because you said yes to Jesus. Quick story, and I promise I'll finish it up. it kind of goes along with what I just said. There was this young man in the first church I pastored. He made a profession of faith. I thought it was genuine. I really did, guys. And I baptized him, but I just kind of watched him that whole year afterwards. And, man, you hardly never seen him at church or anything. And he was living in willful sin. I mean, he really was. And so I brought him in as a pastor. I'm the pastor, right? I brought him in as a pastor, and I said, what's going on? He said, what do you mean? I said, man, don't you remember the commitment you made to the Lord? You're living in willful sin, and I want to be able to walk you through all this. I want to be able to help you. This is what the church is. This is not glorifying God. Yeah, I brought him back to the commitment he made to the Lord. Here's what he said. I'll never forget it because he was so honest, and I commended his honesty because most people won't be this honest. He said, well, Pastor, I have to be totally honest with you. When I made that commitment, I just didn't want to go to hell. That's what he said. And I commended him. He said, I just didn't want to go to hell, and I thought that I could, come down here and say a prayer, join the church and get baptized, and I could hit church, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and I thought that was it. He was totally honest. And I commended him. A lot of people won't say that, will they? Isn't that how they're living? Really? We made a commitment to Jesus. Jesus is not an add-on to our lives. He's not someone we turn to just in bad times and to keep us out of hell. He's not going to be used that way, guys. I'm telling you. He's not. And there's going to be a lot of surprised people, and it aches my heart. He's not going to be used like that. You made a commitment to him first and foremost, and so did I. Now, the strange thing is when we talk like this, people, all right, yeah, I made a commitment to the Lord. And they say it in a way that it's kind of begrudging. You know what I mean? Like, if I fully commit myself to the Lord, he's really going to mess my life up. They don't say it, but that's kind of what they're insinuating, right? Now, let me be totally honest with you. When you say mess your life up, he is going to turn your life upside down. I know that for a fact. He really will. You see, Jesus just doesn't want to come in and fix some leaky pipes or straighten up something. He wants to tear the whole house down and rebuild it. Jesus is not into remodeling. He's going to turn your whole life upside down when you fully commit to him. He really is. But in no way is he going to mess your life up. I contend that for the real believers, I'm talking about real believers, I contend for those ones who are unsatisfied, you haven't fully committed yourself to the Lord. You haven't done it. That's a fact. I know a lot of people say, well, Pastor, I'd like to go to church a little bit. Do it. What can we do to help you? You see, this is what the church is supposed to be about. This is what we're shooting for, right? But each one of us has to be totally committed to Christ. We can't do this by ourselves. 1 or 2 people on fire for the Lord's not going to do it. I have big dreams for this church. That's why I'm still here. But we have to be totally committed to Jesus. Amen? Let's pray.